What you're about to hear is not the sanitized version found in official after-action reports or polished military histories. According to declassified operational records and post-war interviews, one of the most lethal enemies faced by American jungle marksmen in Southeast Asia was never listed on enemy order of battle charts. It had no uniform, no insignia, no face. It was visibility itself, or more precisely, the complete absence of it. Military archives from operations conducted in Vietnam reveal a recurring pattern. Elite marksmen trained for precision at hundreds of meters were suddenly reduced to operating in visual ranges measured in feet, sometimes inches. Dense fog rolled through valleys at dawn. Triple-layered jungle canopies strangled sunlight by mid-morning. Tropical storms turned the air into a shifting wall of gray. And in that world, the sniper was no longer just a hunter. He was prey. Pay close attention to this, because this is the side of war few are willing to discuss. Not the gunfire. Not the kill. But the psychological compression that occurs when a trained observer realizes he can no longer observe. Veterans recall moments when the jungle stopped behaving like terrain and started behaving like an organism. The air felt heavy. Sound warped. Depth perception collapsed. A tree 20 meters away looked identical to one 5 meters distant. Movement, real or imagined, pulsed everywhere. The human brain, evolved to read open horizons, began to betray its owner. For U.S. sniper elements operating under the broader command structure of the United States Army, visibility doctrine collapsed almost immediately upon contact with Southeast Asian jungle reality. Manuals written for European forests or Korean hillsides offered little guidance when every direction looked the same. Green above. Green below. Green in every peripheral glance. According to after-action interviews, one of the first things to fail was orientation. Compasses became unreliable under thick canopy. Landmarks disappeared within minutes. Patrol leaders reported situations where entire teams unknowingly moved in circles for hours, slowly burning daylight and mental clarity. And the sniper, trained to remain still, silent, and patient, experienced something worse. Stillness became dangerous. When visibility drops below 10 meters, immobility is no longer concealment. It becomes vulnerability. Veterans describe lying motionless in the undergrowth while fog drifted past like smoke, knowing that at any moment a shadow could materialize at arm's length. There would be no warning shot. No dramatic engagement. Just sudden proximity. Sudden violence. Sudden silence. One former sniper described it as watching the world dissolve. Targets didn't appear, they emerged. And sometimes they didn't exist at all. This uncertainty introduced a new kind of combat stress. Not fear of being shot, but fear of misperception. Was that movement real? Or a leaf? Was that sound a footstep, or rain striking a broad banana leaf? In low visibility environments, the brain fills gaps aggressively. Every sensory input is overinterpreted. Every pause feels intentional. Silent. Sudden. Fatal. Operational logs show that as missions dragged on, snipers began reporting visual hallucinations during prolonged overwatch in fog-heavy zones. Faces in foliage. Rifles where there were none. Entire patrols swore they were being watched, only to find nothing after extraction. Yet hours later, another unit would be ambushed in the same grid square. This wasn't superstition. It was cognitive overload. The jungle didn't just hide the enemy. It erased certainty. And that forced an evolution. Camouflage techniques changed. Movement doctrine shifted. Survival became less about marksmanship and more about mental endurance. But before those adaptations took hold, many paid the price, not always with their lives, but with something harder to quantify. Confidence. Trust in perception. Trust in reality itself. As this investigation unfolds, we'll expose how low visibility combat reshaped sniper operations, fractured psychological limits, and permanently redefined what danger meant for American marksmen operating in the shadows of Southeast Asia. Because in that war, the most terrifying enemy was often the one you couldn't see, including the one forming inside your own mind. Military records indicate that once visibility dropped below predictable thresholds, traditional sniper doctrine stopped working. Precision optics were rendered almost useless by humidity and condensation. Lenses fogged internally. Reticles blurred. Magnification narrowed perception instead of clarifying it. In the Southeast Asian jungle, seeing farther often meant seeing less. For American marksmen deployed across contested regions of Southeast Asia, survival depended on something far more primitive than marksmanship. It depended on becoming invisible not just to the enemy, but to the environment itself. Early deployments relied on standard-issue camouflage patterns designed for temperate zones. They failed almost immediately. The jungle did not care about patterns. It cared about texture, shadow, and movement. Veterans recall learning this lesson the hard way, watching enemy fighters pass within meters, completely unnoticed, not because of camouflage, but because of stillness combined with shadow alignment. Camouflage evolved from fabric to philosophy. Snipers began modifying their gear in the field. Burlap, jungle vines, rotting leaves, and mud were integrated directly into clothing. Ghillie suits became heavier, darker, and less uniform. Nothing symmetrical. Nothing clean. Clean meant artificial. Artificial meant death. But concealment brought its own danger. Accounts from units operating alongside elements of the United States Marine Corps describe situations where snipers became so visually absorbed into the terrain that friendly patrols nearly walked over them. In low visibility, identification became fragile. One wrong movement. One misunderstood silhouette. Friendly fire incidents rose sharply in fog-drenched sectors. The jungle didn't distinguish friend from foe. It erased both. Rain intensified everything. Tropical downpours didn't just reduce sightlines, they flattened sound. Footsteps vanished. Breathing felt amplified inside one's own skull. Snipers reported the sensation of being sealed inside their own bodies, isolated from the world except for flashes of peripheral movement. Psychologically, this environment was corrosive. Veterans interviewed decades later describe an inversion of fear. Open ground felt terrifying, but so did concealment. Moving meant exposure. Remaining still meant surrendering awareness. Every decision carried risk. Every second demanded calculation. One after-action debrief notes a sniper team that remained motionless for nearly 18 hours under triple canopy cover. They never fired a shot. They never saw the enemy clearly. But both men reported the same sensation afterward, certainty that they had been watched the entire time. No proof. No confirmation. Just conviction. This belief, whether accurate or not, began shaping behavior. Snipers adjusted firing protocols. Engagement ranges shortened dramatically. Some units abandoned scoped rifles temporarily, favoring iron sights for faster target acquisition in close quarters. Others repositioned constantly, accepting noise and movement to avoid mental stagnation. The jungle punished predictability above all else. Camouflage, once a defensive measure, became a psychological test. Could you remain unseen without losing yourself? Could you become part of the terrain without dissolving into paranoia? Records show that many couldn't. Extended missions in low-visibility environments led to sleep deprivation, tunnel vision, and heightened startle responses. Veterans recall flinching at insects, reacting to shadows, firing at sounds that never resolved into targets. Each mistake carried consequences, not just tactical, but moral. Because in that green darkness, certainty was a luxury no one could afford. The jungle forced American snipers to confront an uncomfortable truth: the deadliest battles weren't always against the enemy. Sometimes they were against perception itself. And as visibility continued to collapse deeper into contested zones, something even more dangerous emerged: disorientation so complete that men could no longer tell if they were hunting or already lost. Declassified field reports reveal a phenomenon that commanders struggled to explain at the time. Entire sniper teams were becoming disoriented without ever changing position. They were not retreating. They were not advancing. They were simply losing their sense of place. In the dense interior regions of Vietnam, the jungle dismantled the very concept of orientation. North, south, east, west, these were abstract ideas under triple canopy cover. The sun was invisible. Shadows were unreliable. Even time itself felt distorted. Minutes stretched. Hours collapsed. Snipers described the sensation as being mentally untethered. Unlike conventional infantry patrols, sniper teams operated with minimal movement. They relied on fixed hides, prolonged overwatch, and patient observation. But in low-visibility jungle conditions, that stillness became a trap. Without visual reference points, the mind began to drift. Memory blurred. Direction lost meaning. One Army intelligence summary noted that some teams, after extraction, could not accurately describe their own hide positions, despite having occupied them for days. They remembered sound, smell, fear, but not geography. This wasn't simple confusion. It was spatial collapse. The jungle offered no horizon, no distance cues. Everything was the same shade of green, layered endlessly. Veterans recount moments when they believed they were facing forward, only to later realize they had slowly rotated their bodies over hours, unconsciously tracking phantom movement. The rifle followed the mind. The mind followed anxiety. In interviews conducted decades later, former snipers from units attached to the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam described a recurring nightmare, realizing too late that they had been watching the wrong direction the entire time. This fear changed behavior. Some teams began marking their hides with tiny, tactile reference points, knots in vines, stones pressed into soil, pressure marks felt through gloves. Vision could no longer be trusted. Touch became orientation. Sound became navigation. But sound was unreliable too. Rain masked footsteps. Wind bent branches unpredictably. Animal movement mimicked human patrols. In low visibility, the jungle produced constant false positives. Every snap carried intent. Every rustle suggested proximity. The brain, unable to filter properly, entered a state of permanent alert. Silent. Suffocating. Exhausting. Medical officers later identified symptoms consistent with acute combat stress reactions. Elevated heart rates during inactivity. Tremors. Dissociation. A sense of watching oneself from outside the body. Snipers were physically present but psychologically adrift. One Marine sniper recounted lying prone for so long in a fog-choked ravine that he forgot what his own hands looked like. When he finally moved, the motion startled him. He raised his rifle on instinct at himself. That moment ended his deployment. Records indicate that command underestimated this threat for years. Disorientation wasn't visible. It didn't show up on casualty reports. It didn't leave bullet holes or blood trails. But it degraded effectiveness silently, mission by mission. The jungle didn't need to kill you. It only needed to unanchor you. As operations pushed deeper into contested zones, low visibility wasn't just a condition, it became a weapon. One that eroded confidence, fractured perception, and blurred the line between vigilance and madness. And in that mental fog, another danger waited, not disorientation, but the creeping certainty that you were being watched, long before you ever saw anyone. There is a moment described repeatedly in veteran interviews when fear stops being reactive and becomes anticipatory. No gunfire. No confirmed contact. Just a sudden, overwhelming conviction that you are no longer alone. In the low-visibility jungles of Southeast Asia, this sensation became known among sniper teams as the click. The instant when the mind shifts from observation to expectation. You stop looking for movement and start waiting for it. Operational intelligence reports from engagements involving the Viet Cong confirm what American snipers slowly came to understand: the enemy had mastered invisibility long before U.S. forces arrived. They did not rely on long sight lines. They thrived in proximity. They moved when you couldn't see and stopped when you could. This asymmetry was devastating. Snipers trained to dominate space through distance suddenly found distance meaningless. Visibility collapsed engagement ranges to knife-fight distances without warning. In fog and shadow, the first sign of enemy presence was often the realization that you had already been observed for hours. Veterans described the jungle going quiet in ways that defied logic. Insects stopped. Birds vanished. Wind died. These weren't cinematic exaggerations, they were environmental cues learned through survival. Silence, in this context, was not peace. It was preparation. One debrief recounts a sniper team positioned near a jungle trail used intermittently by enemy couriers. Visibility was under 5 meters. For 3 consecutive hours, nothing happened. Then one sniper noticed something wrong, the wrong kind of stillness. He later described it as the absence of randomness. Moments later, a grenade landed behind their hide. They survived. Barely. Psychologically, the most damaging aspect wasn't the ambush, it was the realization that the enemy had been present, stationary, and watching them the entire time. No sound. No movement. No warning. This bred paranoia, but not irrational paranoia. Calculated paranoia. Snipers began assuming observation at all times. Every hide was compromised. Every pause was monitored. This mindset improved survival in some cases, but it carried a cost. Constant hypervigilance eroded judgment. Reaction times shortened dangerously. Some veterans admitted to firing preemptively, unable to tolerate uncertainty any longer. Rules of engagement blurred under fog. Low visibility stripped away confirmation. Targets were shapes. Heat. Motion. The ethical weight of pulling a trigger without visual certainty haunted many long after the war ended. Not because they doubted the necessity, but because they doubted what they had actually seen. One former sniper summarized it years later: "I don't know how many times I was right. I only remember the times I was afraid I wasn't." This fear of unseen eyes, of silent assessment, transformed the sniper's role. He was no longer the unseen observer. He was part of a mutual surveillance loop where neither side could fully see the other, but both could feel presence. The jungle became a psychological hall of mirrors. And as missions continued under these conditions, the final toll was no longer measured in casualties alone, but in the quiet, enduring damage carried home by those who learned what it meant to live under constant, invisible scrutiny. That legacy would not end with extraction. It would follow them out of the jungle. When extraction helicopters finally lifted American snipers out of the jungle, the war did not end. Not really. What remained was not the memory of shots fired, but of shots restrained. Not faces seen clearly, but shapes half-formed in fog. The enemy, once invisible, had fused with the environment and then with the mind. Post-war psychological assessments later reviewed by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs reveal a pattern unique to those who fought in sustained low-visibility environments. These veterans did not always report classic battlefield flashbacks. Instead, they described sensations. Compression. Sudden alertness in enclosed spaces. A reflexive distrust of silence. For jungle snipers, danger was never announced. It emerged. That conditioning did not switch off. Many veterans reported difficulty adjusting to civilian life not because of violence, but because of ambiguity. Foggy mornings triggered unease. Dense forests felt oppressive. Even dimly lit rooms recreated the same diffuse darkness where certainty once collapsed. Their nervous systems had been calibrated for a world where not seeing was the greatest threat of all. Interviews conducted decades after the conflict reveal something even more unsettling. Some veterans stated they trusted their instincts less after the war than before it. In the jungle, instincts were necessary, but often wrong. Survival meant questioning perception constantly. That habit lingered. Was that sound real? Was that memory accurate? Was that reaction justified? This internal interrogation became permanent. From a doctrinal perspective, the legacy of these missions reshaped U.S. military training. Visibility is no longer treated as a background condition. It is now recognized as an active battlefield variable capable of degrading morale, judgment, and identity itself. Modern jungle and urban warfare doctrine reflects lessons written not in manuals, but in nervous systems. But for the men who lived it, the cost was personal. One former sniper put it simply, "I never feared what I could see. I feared what I couldn't confirm." That sentence captures the true impact of low-visibility warfare. It wasn't about marksmanship. It wasn't even about the enemy. It was about existing in a state where reality itself felt negotiable, where every decision was made without full information, and every mistake could be final. Silent. Sudden. Invisible. The jungle taught American snipers a lesson no firing range ever could, that danger does not always announce itself with noise or motion. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches. And sometimes it leaves scars without ever being seen. Today, when we speak of the unseen cost of war, this is what it means. The erosion of certainty. The loss of trust in perception. The quiet burden carried long after the shooting stops. To those who endured it and to those who still live with the echoes, this story is not entertainment. It is recognition. If this investigation helped you understand a side of war rarely discussed, support this work by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it. These stories matter. And they should not remain invisible.